Hey everyone, welcome back. I am here today to review my very first ever Puma shoe. Now, I've heard a lot of really good things about Puma as a company in general, but I've been a little resistant to trying them. I'm a kind of a creature of habit, but I'm quite frankly breaking out of that, if you haven't noticed, since I've been trying so many new shoes. And it's been something that's been so exciting and fulfilling for me because there's so much out there. There's so many great companies. There's so many great variations of shoes that I was limiting myself. I was putting myself in a box, if you will, and I'm very pumped to be branching out even further by trying Puma. So today we have the Puma MagMax Nitro 2. This is the second iteration. Of course, as I said, I have not tried the first because this is the first pair of Puma shoes I'm trying, but I'm pretty excited because I've heard really good things about the first iteration, and they've made some minor improvements that I'm going to cover throughout this process and talk about all of the different features and what my thoughts are after taking these out on a run. So let's get into it. Yes, of course, we have another neutral shoe. Shocker. I will say I did take this shoe out of the box briefly just to weigh it because I wanted to give a good overview of the weight between men's and women's, as the men's weight is the only thing that is available online. This is not the lightest shoe in the box, if you will. This shoe does come in weighing for a women's size 7 at 7.9 ounces and a men's size 9 is 9.7. So flip those two numbers around. It is meant to be a daily trainer, but a good shoe that's going to be able to sustain for quite a few miles. It is one of those maximum cushion shoes, and as you may know, I have been on the hunt for a maximum cushion shoe that I can put on a lot of miles in. The women's does come in 4 colorways currently, and then the men's comes in 5. I'm assuming that's going to change with time, and since this is a very, very new shoe, obviously there are new colors that come as others sell out. I have noticed with Puma in general, I don't know if anyone else has, because I've been eyeing Puma for some time, but I've just been a little bit reluctant to pull the trigger. I've noticed that shoes sell out very quickly with them. And just wanted to kind of give you that little caveat because if you were interested in this, I don't know if it'll be there for much longer. I think that they do have a pretty quick turnaround with their products. I don't really know what it is about them. It feels a little bit more like small batch, if you will. I know that that's probably not the case. It just seems almost like this high demand, sell out quickly kind of business model. And I struggle with those sometimes. And I know that Puma may not be that company. And I also know that there are other companies that are like that. But it's just something I've noticed where sizes start to sell out so quickly. And it's kind of a frustration that I have because as a consumer, you don't want to have to feel this impulsive rush to buy shoes quickly. But maybe someone could speak to that who is more familiar with Puma and can let me know if that's actually true or if it's just my luck out of the handful of shoes I have looked at myself. So I'm not sure. So as I said, this is a daily trainer, but with the maximum cushioning here, we do have the nitrogen-infused nitro foam that Puma uses. It is going to have some good energy return, but it's going to be able to be a little bit more of a plush feel so you can run for longer distances. Feeling it out of the box, it is feeling like a softer foam for sure. Now, it's not always the easiest to tell out of the gate when you physically grab a shoe and feel the foam, but sometimes when it is a softer foam, I notice the shoe does feel that sinking in feeling a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. So I'm hoping to have that delicate balance between that and the opposite of having it be very firm and not comfortable. I don't anticipate it being a firmer shoe just from my initial feelings, but I'll be able to report back soon. It does have an engineered mesh upper. This does feel very soft and breathable. It doesn't feel overly thin, but it does not feel thick. I think it's going to be kind of that nice Goldilocks porridge situation where it's going to be right in the middle. I'm very familiar with this material. This does feel like something I've run in before, so I'm not too concerned with that. The outsole has a very solid grippage going on here. I feel that this is built pretty sturdy and meant for different types of traction. It is a neutral shoe. However, they did widen and round the toe box ever so slightly from the first version of this. You can kind of tell from looking at it that it is a little bit more meaty, if you will, in the upper part of the shoe, but it doesn't seem to be wide. I think it's going to be wide foot friendly, which is a plus for those who maybe are a little bit more limited with what options are out there for wide shoes. I do have more narrow feet, so it's usually not a concern for me, but I do like to have a little bit of flexibility here. And then again, as I said, neutral shoe, but you do have a good amount of stability going on in the midfoot here. Another difference that they did make in the foam is they did lighten up the foam a little bit here. Typically when a company lightens up the foam here, it's for a number of reasons. One being obviously reducing the weight wherever you can. Of course, when you're using a shoe for a lot of miles, you don't want a heavy shoe. I'm not just speaking for myself, I think that's pretty typical, especially for some of those easier runs. But then also another reason that a company would do this is to have better energy return, which was something that they were looking to achieve with this foam. The heel to toe drop is 8 millimeters. Big fan of that. The previous version did have the same heel to toe drop, so no changes on that front. I do believe that the shoe will be good for somebody who may be leaning a little bit more on the overpronation side. Although it's a neutral shoe, it did say that it is best for people who do overpronate. And what I'm seeing here, obviously you have that wider foundation on the outsole, but then also, I don't know if it'll be easy to see, but the foam kind of comes out a little bit on the inside of the ankle there. You can kind of see right through here. So I think that that's gonna provide a tiny bit more stability for those who do tend to pronate. I am someone who does pronate a little bit, nothing too extreme. Never have needed a stability shoe, but I definitely need at least something on the solid neutral side. That's definitely better for me. The heel collar feels very stable overall. It does seem to be a tiny bit thick towards the top. That's always a concern with me for temperature control reasons, but I don't think that there will be any issues with blistering or rubbing. Price point here for the shoe, this does come in at $180 US. That has not changed from the first version. Interestingly enough, the first version is not on sale right now, which a lot of times when a company is coming out with a new shoe or has already come out with a new shoe, they do drop that price of the first one. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. That seems pretty uncommon from what I've seen. So I guess if you're a fan of the first version, there's not necessarily a benefit of continuing to get that. If you're interested in trying the second, it's not like you're gonna scoop them all up because they're on sale. I would stick to the one you are most comfortable in. All right, well, that does it for my high-level overview. It is now time to take this out for a run. Because it is that max cushion shoe that's going to carry me for miles, I'm planning on running probably 5 or 6 miles, and I do want to take this through all the different ranges of paces. I'll probably stay in my zone 2 pace level, which is going to be in the 8s, but I want to see how this performs at some of the faster paces too, and see if it can handle something such as a tempo run. I do believe, based on the foam composition and the points that were made for this, I think it will be able to handle it, but only a matter of time before I can report back. Stay tuned to learn if this is a Thunderstruck shoe, in my opinion. All right, everyone, I am back for my run. I did just over 5 miles today, and I kept that pace range between 8-minute 46 seconds on like the slower end, and then I did go all the way up to around a 6-minute and 40-second mile. I primarily stayed in my tempo run pace in the low 8s. I did want to pick it up and do a few intervals in those faster paces just to see how these performed when you did pick up the speed. So I'm going to talk to you about what my first initial thoughts are, and then we'll get into the ratings in just a little bit. Something that I didn't realize when I was giving you the grand tour, if you will, of these shoes is this tongue has a lot of stretch to it. It's interesting because it again reminds me of a glove-like shoe, but the whole shoe doesn't have that same stretchy material. It's just the tongue. So putting this on was a little bit of a shocker to me. I did not anticipate that. And it was a little bit deceptive because out of the box, it doesn't seem to be too long, but because of all that stretch, once your foot's in there, it does go pretty far up your ankle. Now, I know some people have a little bit of sensitivities to the tongue of the shoe, and it did not bother me necessarily in the run. I was anticipating it was going to, but it did feel a little odd, and it was noticeable. Nothing that actually deterred me from wanting to continue my run by any means, but want to point it out for you guys if you are a little hesitant about how that may feel. It's pretty long and noticeable. It does kind of go up your ankle, and it's pressing against the curvature of your ankle pretty much the entire duration of the run. Putting these on, they were very comfortable out of the gate. My foot did fit into them very nicely. I did find these to be pretty true to size. They were a little bit on the roomier side, nothing that would make me want to size down. But if you do sort of kind of waver in between maybe a 7 and 7.5, so in between a full and a half size, I would say you could go down if you wanted to, or if you prefer a little bit of a more snug fit. But if you're true to size, definitely stick true to size. I found that the toe box was very roomy and forgiving, which again, that's something that they did modify in this iteration compared to the original. And it definitely is going to be wide foot friendly. I do feel that that's not going to be an issue for the average foot. I was worried about the foam being a little on the soft side just from grabbing it and kind of manipulating it a little bit. I felt that there may be a little bit too much plushness for me. However, when I got into my run, I did find that that energy return it did describe was there. I felt that there was that good balance of having that comfort from the foam, but being able to continue to drive you forward. I did find that there was a pretty good turnover in these shoes. The rocker isn't necessarily very dramatic, as you can see here, so I was a little worried maybe there would be a tiny bit of dragging and lacking of that full turnover, but I didn't have any issues with that at all. Temperature-wise, these did run a tiny bit on the warm side for me. Obviously, they did describe the upper as a breathable mesh upper. It's a little on the thicker side. It's very, very flexible, but I still really appreciate when they do lack a little bit in the material on the upper so that you can run some of those long miles without overheating. I do not like to run hot when I'm running a long run. The heel collar here gave me no issues whatsoever. It wasn't rubbing. After almost 5.5 miles or so, I didn't have any indications of any blisters forming, which is a great win for me. Temperature-wise though here, I was a little concerned that maybe there would be a little bit too much material and that would kind of contribute to that overall overheating sensation, but honestly, I feel like most of that was just due to the upper. I will say I did have to adjust the laces a couple times before actually taking off in my run. I found that around the ankle component here, that was seemingly a little bit more on the roomy side than I had anticipated. Now, I think if I had done that additional lockdown utilizing that last hole here, I think that would have solved the problem pretty quickly, but because this was my first time, I wanted to just see if I could figure out a way to make it efficient with just traditional lacing method. Once I got the perfect level of tightness, though, we had no issues during the run. Nothing really seemed to be vulnerable throughout the duration of my run. Let's go ahead and get into the ratings of these, and then I'll talk about some of these details a little bit more in depth when I get into each respective category. Comfort. Overall, I'm going to go ahead and give these a 9.2. I did find these to be very comfortable. They fit very nicely on my foot. Of course, like I said, maybe the slightest bit on the bigger side. However, that didn't impact me in a negative way at all. I do like to have a little bit of room, not to the point of moving around, because that can aggravate your feet, cause some blisters, potentially lead to some bunions, rubbing that we don't really want. But the comfortability of these was pretty solid. I found that these did a good job running a little bit of a longer distance, and I didn't find my feet fatiguing at all. The overall upper was very comfortable too on my foot. Despite it being on the warmer side, I have no complaints of the material composition as a whole. I think we can scale back the fabric amount, but in general, didn't impact the level of comfort I was feeling. Even though I spoke of the tongue of the shoe being on the longer side, a tiny bit of rubbing, it didn't impact my level of comfort. I was concerned that would be the case once I put it on, but then once I got into my run, I could feel it there, but I didn't really notice it. It wasn't, since it's so soft and flexible, it just felt like a sock, honestly. But sure, I would probably prefer it to be a little bit shorter and not even short. If you look at it, it's not that long, but because when you put your foot in there, it elongates that material, and it does kind of go up your ankle a tiny bit. Performance. I'm going to go ahead and give this a 9.1. I thought that these performed very well with what they said they would do. I found that these thrived the most during that tempo run pace. So for me, that is somewhere in the upper 7s, the lower 8s. Now, when I did pick it up to in the high 6s just to kind of do some faster turnovers to see how they perform, I did feel that they were not as effective at those faster paces. That's to be expected. It's not meant to be a sprinting shoe, a race day shoe. It is meant for your everyday runs, and due to the maximum cushioning here, it's going to thrive more so in some of those longer runs, anything from, your zone 2 kind of leisurely long runs up to a tempo pace. I do like that there's some versatility in there because I think you get a little bit more bang for your buck being able to have that flexibility. Quality. I'm going to go ahead and give this a 9.1. I feel like I'm going to be sitting in that range for pretty much all the categories. The quality of this seemed to be pretty solid overall. I was a little concerned with the quality of the foam by my initial feelings, but like I said, once I got into the run, it really did not let me down in terms of how that comfort of the foam felt during the run. I feel like this is a solid foam composition. Being nitrogen infused, I feel like it gives you a little bit of that responsiveness that you're looking for in a long everyday run shoe. The upper feels very great on your foot. Like I said, we already talked about the material and how we could maybe scale back a little bit, but that doesn't impact the quality. The quality itself is there, and some people may really enjoy this overall. If you don't really have any issues with temperature control in a shoe, this isn't going to bother you. I feel like it does a very good job at molding to your foot in a way that is comfortable. Something I will point out, and this I would say is a quality issue, but it's not going to impact performance at all. And if you could see here, this is where the shoelaces tie. There's some pilling going on this little lip here that goes over the tongue of the shoe. Now, that's a little bit surprising because after one run, there's already a sign of pilling from the fabric. That's a tiny bit of a red flag for me, but because it's not impacting the shoe itself, it's such a minor detail, I'm not gonna really dock it, but something I wanna point out because I do feel that you're gonna notice that. Again, your shoelace is rough. If this material is already pilling, it's probably not the highest of quality, but kind of goes into that overall maybe thought of this being something that could be redesigned in the future to make this a little bit less stretchy and long for the runners. Price point. This, I'm going to go ahead and give a 9.6. I feel this is such a good price point for a max cushion shoe. A lot of the max cushion shoes out there, I feel, run north of 180, and for 180 US dollars, I think this is a solid shoe overall. Being that this was my first Puma purchase, they have the kind of, I think it's like their subscriber program where if you sign up, you get 20% off your first pair of shoes, which was a steal for these. I did get the 20% off by purchasing these because I've never shopped at Puma before, but at full price, I think that that's a great price point. I don't feel that when you're getting to the 200 plus range, I feel like that is on the higher end, and that's a lot of money to spend on a shoe for your more recovery kind of everyday slow runs. I don't know. That's just my personal preference there. I think that everyone kind of has their own opinion on what seems reasonable for that type of run. But for me, I think 180 is a sweet spot. I don't think that that's on the lowest end by any means, but it's on the lower end for sure from what I've been seeing. And a lot of the shoes I've been reviewing recently have been 200 and up for this type of run. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think that this is an overall really solid shoe. That being said, is it going to be a Thunderstruck shoe for me? I'm gonna have to say, yes it is. There's so few things that I would change about this shoe. I really enjoyed it. I was loving that I could go for a tempo run and sustain and feel pretty refreshed afterwards. And I didn't feel like the weight was impacting me negatively, which is something that I'm always looking for. I do tend to steer towards lighter weight shoes overall. I enjoyed these. I think that if you are looking for something that is a little bit more max cushioned, tiny bit more of a stability shoe, even though it says it's a neutral shoe, I beg to differ. I do find this to be on the more stable side. I mean, there is some more flexibility in the ankle overall, which I think that is a component you would look for in a stability shoe, but I do think it leans more stability. I think that you'll have a lot of fun in this. I think that you can definitely pick it up. I would not say that this is a shoe that you can, if you're looking at PR, maybe not. I don't want to say nobody can, because I think anyone can if they just believe. But for me, this would not be one I would take out for a race day, in my opinion. I'm curious if anyone has any more recommendations. I am willing to start to go outside the box of recovery shoes. I feel like I'm starting to find my groove of what I really like, but as I gear up for this possibility of running a marathon in the fall, I'm looking for something that's going to be a solid race day shoe for a full marathon. but something that I can still do some long runs into. I want to be able to train in it and not just have it be my race day shoe. Let me know if you tried these shoes and what your thoughts are, or if you tried the original version and if you enjoyed those and if I should try them out. Anyways, until next time, everyone, thanks for tuning in.